Hello, Derek. Thank you very much for agreeing to be a part of this In Conversation series. You've asked a number of really interesting questions, and perhaps through the conversation we have today, I can begin answering my ideas behind why I'm doing this. But ultimately, I've known you for around about 3, 4 years. You interviewed me for a project you're involved with, which we will get onto. But first of all, tell everybody who Derek McKenzie is.
So as I was saying to you earlier, when you sent me the questions, I I had to think about it and make some notes, and I think only rightly, rather than, although I'm hoping this to be an informal conversation. Um,
It will be.
you know, I did need to reflect and think about it, and one of the things that I thought about before just today, really, about I wonder who Derek McKenzie is to people that see me. You know,
Mm, mm,
I wonder who, in their mind's eyes, through what I post, what I say, if they've ever heard me speak, I wonder who they had me down as. And I think that's what happens, and what's happened as a result of most of my life. People have perceived me to be, whether it's through what I say, what I don't say, my color, my gender, I'm always cast as something, a perception of their own mind. And I've kind of learned as I've gone along, your perception of me does not have to be my reality. And so, yeah, I kind of wondered about that, because I have something like, just over 10,000 on my network on LinkedIn, and I post. And again, to post something, I think, on LinkedIn, that is what I am exposing myself to, right? People to make judgments
yeah,
about who I am. So who am I?
indeed.
I was born in Lewisham Hospital in South London. Don't remember living in Deptford. We lived in Deptford. And it was a time, maybe one of the only times, my father was around. My father and mother ended up, if you like, and there's reasons why I say this, right? Ended up in Trinidad and Tobago, right? What they used to call the West Indies, but is it the West Indies now? Now the Caribbean, right? That's where they ended up. And I remember I'm a recent orphan. My mum died in December 2020.
Sorry to hear that.
That's fine. And my dad died probably 3 years before that. Not a figure in my life as such, but my mum was. And I remember going out to Trinidad, because she moved back out there, built a house and on a land that belonged to her family, and going through her stuff and finding her passport, which kind of it said British colony, you know. And I mentioned that because I suppose for me anyway, that also was shaping me, and I didn't know anything about it.
Mm,
How my mum was shaped, what she passed on to me. She was a very, very beautiful, fair-skinned woman that had been damaged by a colonial mindset, that division of what color means.
mm,
Yeah. And interestingly, she ended up with my dad, who's our complexion, right? But not straightforwardly. It wasn't straightforward. In a way, when she tells me about the stories coming over on the ship, and my dad approaching her at the jukebox machine, in her mind, I would never go out with that man. He's too black and he's too ugly. The colonial mindset that she experienced herself as a 3-year-old girl, sat on the veranda where her siblings' father would come and pick them up, and not her. My grandfather my mother's biological father, was at the time one of the richest men in Trinidad and Tobago, and he decided through his mother's wishes, will, the rest of it, that my grandmother, my mother's mother, was too dark, and so he should leave her, which he did. And as far as my mum knew, and from what she told me, she was and is his only biological child. And so, the story repeats itself. I was born in Lewisham Hospital. I remember where I first lived was in East Dulwich, and then in Peckham on what became as a part of a no-go area in the state. There was 3 massive estates. One was the Aylesbury estate. Ours was plonked right in the middle, the Gloucester Grove estate. And then you had the North Peckham estate. And it was a no-go area, which was really interesting because we could leave our doors open and neighbours would keep an eye on those things for us, right? But the picture that was painted, the story about those estates, which I kind of get, it was a no-go area,
Yeah.
So tough surroundings I grew up in, just my mother, father not about, and really my peers who I sort of looked up to find out, how, and I'm thinking about it now, how do I navigate this world? Where do I belong in this world? I think I was definitely, by the stories anyway, that my mother received and that I received, growing up in the 70s, that the media, school, and all those stories, what it meant to be black and actually a black male. I was marred. I was marked by that. I have no doubt. And whereas I suppose you may have had protection from it if you were from that era, I didn't have any protection. So I bumbled my way through. But what I knew and had no one to turn to, it didn't have to be that way. It didn't have to be that way. I was a shy kid, right? I was bullied, I was the one in my mind had no character, right? We were very poor. So all these things that were going on shaped me. I remember sitting on the rooftop sometimes crying, because everybody else had their father to come around. And again, the damaging stories told about black people and families, at some point I bought into that was the case. But it's that kind of subjugation, putting down, right?
Yeah.
And I say that for a reason, because these stories still continue today, in some form or shape. And I used to sit on this roof and cry and ask, why are people so horrible? Why are they so cruel? Even in my own household, why? I remember sitting, one of the things, and you may have seen this on Facebook, on LinkedIn, lots of different things that happened during my life that again has left if you like, a scar. And one of the scars was that I remember sitting on our estate, with my peers, and we're smoking weed and laughing and joking as we usually did. And we were due to go off to a party, and we were enjoying ourselves so much we left it really late, right? But then we decided, let's go. My peers, we had a sound system at that time, I must say as well. I remember my first record that I bought was Gregory Isaacs, a Slave Driver, a little single 7-inch, and these songs then, in a way, for me anyway, even though I didn't know it and I couldn't comprehend it, it gave me a sense of some kind of roots, right?
Mm.
But I didn't understand it. I didn't go, yeah, that's what that is. You know, it was like not really thinking about, but something beated. When I listened to that sort of music, whether it's dub, uh, Gregory Isaacs, Burning Spear, whoever, something beated, but I couldn't articulate it. So we decided to go to the party. I don't think we tried that hard, you know, but we was trying to find where it was and couldn't find it. We gave up really easy because we wanted to go back and sit down and just laugh and joke and smoke more weed. That was where the party was at.
Mm.
Unfortunately, what happened, it was the New Cross fire, that party.
Oh.
And a few of our close friends died in that party, as did my girlfriend at the time. And, you know, that amongst whether it be sus, whether it be just the outward racism that we would face. Mark me. Our generation, I know this, right? The 70s growing up, we were the generation that said no more. Yeah, we weren't like our parents, and I'm not saying all our parents were, we grinned and bared it. Our generation was, my generation was a generation that said no more. No more. That reminds me of Aswad song, yeah, where in, what was that film where he's in there and Josh Shucker's in there and he's come to the dance really late, right? And the police is knocking down wanting to raid, right? And that's kind of a real depiction of what was going on. And he was saying, no more, no more. And he's staying there and he's going, no, don't run, no more, no more. We ain't taking this no more.
It's a wonderful introduction, Derek. Thank you. There have been moments I wanted to jump in and ask questions off of the setup that we have arranged. So I'll begin with some of those questions, and then I just want to talk a little bit more about what you just highlighted, this idea of no more growing up in the 70s and 80s. How did you become a counselor? Counseling, Peckham, really?
Yeah, how did I? Well, I felt or didn't get round to telling you my way of my way. And I suppose it was a way, you know, I do believe that the system has a way of maneuvering one down a certain path. I believe that, right? And if I have no, and I'm going to try and stay out the kind of abstract, the theories and what have you. But if I haven't been provided with, whether through society, whether through my family or schooling, with a way of navigating and making decisions about what's down that path. You know, I'm up Swanee's Creek, right? Yeah. I had no resistance. You know, all I had as the stories that was building up that I'm of no value. Yeah, you know, as Curry would say, you know, not only am I killable, but I'm also rapeable, and it doesn't mean anyone. No one's going to care because that's a done thing. It's okay. You know, as young kids, right? And I don't know what happened to it. As really young kids, you know, we're playing out, you know, and we're not as yet infested with these ideologies, right? Yeah, color don't mean anything. We're like young kids and we're playing out, right? But what I realized was that something unsaid was anytime we were going to go and knock on John's or Tommy's door, and it was a white family, All the black kids stayed back. We wouldn't go to the door. And I wondered what happened to that. What happened to that attitude? You know, and a few of those kids are still my friends today. I never asked them, what happened? How did that change? Has it changed? So where it led me, I smoked weed as an 8-year-old. My father gave me weed as an 8-year-old. And, you know, I didn't really have, there was a point in time, you know, I think from 9 upwards that I stopped being a kid. You know, I stopped being a kid. It's almost that I wasn't afforded that for many different reasons. You know, so I'm smoking weed as an 8-year-old. You know, my father made it okay in front of my mum. I remember this one time he came round, he said, do you smoke weed? Truth is being out in the square, right, with some of the bigger boys, I'd always have a little tote or something. They thought it was funny with the younger ones, right? So I had, but I looked at my mum terrified, and he said, don't worry about it. Yeah, I'd rather him smoke weed than cigarettes. Some people might find that questionable, right? I've questioned it today because I also have been, my mind has been colonized about a way of being and thinking. But it's something that needs to be unpacked, which I'm not going to do it now. But I look at my granddaughters, I look at my nieces and nephews. It's not something that I would do at all. But it's still something that is questionable, right? That I think needs opening to up for debate. From weed to alcohol, because I smoked and I felt paranoid. Right? Remember, as I say, I was a shy kid. I felt paranoid. And then I started alcohol. With alcohol, there was a progression. It isn't, I don't believe, as some researchers said, I don't believe that if you start here, you're going to progress on to harder ones. I did. And for a while, I think it was the glue in a way that held me together in this harsh world the world that I occupied anyway. And the life with that came along. There was a point in time that I was kind of held in high esteem for the wrong reasons in my area. You know, we talk about badman and things like that. Yeah, I was, you know, archetype badman, if you like. Yeah, and at the same time, feeling as though I was a chameleon, that wasn't me, but had no way out of it. You know,
Yeah.
and so the lifestyle came with that, and with that, it meant that I spent a lot of years in that world where it was a big fall from this reputation that I'd supposedly had, which I never wanted anyway. Yeah, to being somebody that people would look at and think, what's happened? You know, and kind of avoid me. You know, spending lots of time in Her Majesty's hotels. Yeah. And even getting a reputation again, that fraudulent, that way of being, right? That I think I am supposed to be. And again, I made the decision to do that, but again, it's that external things coming in.
Mm-hmm.
If you like, you know, what it means to be a black male, be black and male, what it means to be, you know, strong. It was in one of those hotels that I decided to learn to read and write properly. That was in my late 30s, right? And what I wanted to do, I thought social work was where I suppose I would be better suited. And it didn't work out. You know, I did a modular access course to social work, when it came to choosing, you had 6 universities you could choose. It's really interesting because, again, I didn't understand what was happening then, but I understand it. Assumptions anyway. Now, Brunel wouldn't take me on because of my past. They made the decision without really seeing it through, because I discussed it with some people. They, at the time, it's the HCPC now, but at the time, the social work regulating body, which I can't remember what it was, they said that I wouldn't be able to register. I'd already been living in Bournemouth and went through a whole process to become a youth worker with Bournemouth Council. Yeah. Bournemouth, interestingly enough, was the 6th university, was the 6th in priority, was the 6th. But when Brunel said what they said, when I didn't pass the exam at, Metropolitan University, when, Goldsmith turned around and said, when I did the interview, they said I did really well on the exam, but they looked at my record and went, wow, we've never seen anything like this before. Why do you want to study with us? Don't you know that we are the best university for social work? What I heard was, you're not welcome here. The lights are, you're not. I remember coming out there, it was like 4 o'clock when I sat down in my car, and I bawled. I cried. And I said, do you know what? It stops here. I went to Oxford Brookes prior to that and did the interview, and supposedly, from what the feedback, I did really well. And do you know what the interviewer said to me? She asked me something about Emile Durkheim, but then proceeded to say, why didn't you go and do youth work? And I thought, and it's only after, but it was familiar throughout my life, but I didn't know it. I didn't have the words to just articulate it and understand it.
That's a really interesting point. That awareness.
Yeah.
How, when would you say it arrived? We're going off piste here. Primarily because of what the information that you're bringing up is kind of taking me in a particular direction, which is useful.
Yeah, but I'm going in the direction to the question you asked me still. So when we've not gone off topic. Yeah. And so for 2 days I stayed indoors. It must have been like a weekend, a Friday. And like I said, crying, and I was disheartened. And it wasn't the no. It was that thing that I'd been trying to escape from returned. That very thing that I'd been trying to escape from returned. It was there again. And so I decided I had a level 2 certificate in counselling skills, a level 2 in counselling studies. And I thought, let me go and pick that back up. So I wasn't deterred. Process began. I did that. I felt it. I went to Lewisham College, interviewed. I believe that I interviewed well, and what they did is they put me on a waiting list. If somebody decides not to come on board, I could come on board. I also applied for Guildford College, which was a foundation degree in humanistic counselling, bit off what I thought more than I can chew. But I think when I think back at it, that was the only other one that I could find at the time. And so I was sort of preparing for a failure there, and kind of had a different option, even though I felt that that wasn't going to happen. I went for the interview, and I remember going up there and going into the reception and not knowing where the department was. And there was this sole, I'd say, white, middle-aged woman, short cropped hair, right? And sitting eating her food. And I said, excuse me, I'm sorry to disturb you. Could you tell me where the counselling department was? Okay, I'll say it again. Maybe she couldn't hear me. Excuse me, could you tell me where the counselling department? She didn't flinch, didn't move her head, and I was stood there and didn't mention anything. Didn't even look at me. Although I'm sure she knew. She saw me coming into that cafeteria. It's the same woman on the weekend that first I got there first, and she walks in, right, as one of the first tutors from the counselling department. Anyway, that's another story. So I got on that course, and I remember writing a paper, continuing professional and personal development, and in that, I don't think anybody else coined this, but during that course, humanistic, there's a lot of different supposedly methods that comes under that umbrella, as does psychoanalysis, right? Or, you've got 3 waves of CBT now, right? But existentialism was touched upon, and it just, I couldn't even say existentialism. I couldn't say phenomenology. Even still, I can't even say it by
You
the
said
sounds.
it very well,
Yeah,
Derek.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But there was something about it. Again, there was a tap in, not that one, but there was another tap in. It was different. It felt different at the time. And so, I kind of read around that, even though it was only touched upon, because what they was really touching on is more the psychodynamic, psychoanalysis, person-centered, really, and, a bit of Gestalt, but you knew where their leanings were. Even during that course, I think there was an assumption, to frustrate me. So I was the only black male on that course of 21 of my peers. I made 21. There's 21 of us. Majority, 2/3 or more, white middle-class women. And then there was your middle-class Asian women and a couple of working-class women. And I'm using categories here, right? I'm categorizing them. I'm very much aware of that, right? And some of them stood by me, and they could see that actually I in our triads, I believed I was doing well. I don't believe I was doing anything wrong, but everyone else could get the go ahead to go on to, placements, but I couldn't. I had to continually do that. I must have done it about 4 times. And, admittedly, like I felt on this journey, I ain't doing this. I'm not doing it. But I stuck it. Having done the foundation degree, I then, as I said, I was reading around existentialism, and I saw online a course which was based over in Waterloo, an existential, a course in existential psychotherapy and counselling. And it said you needed a 2-1 at least. Right? I hadn't even done a degree. I'd done a foundation degree, which I suppose is like almost an advanced diploma. But I went along anyway because I was so interested.
Yeah.
By it. And, I was interviewed by the owner and her husband. And because of the work that I was involved with, I worked within addictions. Again, does our jobs choose us, or do we choose it?
This is a good question.
Yeah. So within addictions, I've done a lot of work. I had done some work. I was a youth worker. And so it was said that my experience, or being with, if you like, or working with people, was enough. And so they, for me, as I'm speaking about it now, they held the experience, right, of being with above, which I think is really interesting, and I'd go along with it, above actually having the paper to say I've done that. Yeah. And so I got on the course, but at that time I said, you know what? It's a 4-year doctorate, but There's no way that I can do that doctorate. And I said it was going to be hard going to just get the post-grad certificate, the year, but that's what I was going for. In term 2, I had to withdraw because of some events that was going on in my life. I was involved, I was in a car crash and I got whiplash. I'd broken up from a girlfriend at that time. I found myself again up to all hours in the morning trying to even write an introduction and couldn't even get past an introduction. So I left, even though there's something about a small training organization. I felt held at that point by the owner, admin, and my cohort. I felt held and seen, funny enough. Yeah, and so, but I withdrew.
What was the makeup of that course?
Again, it was a small cohort. I'd like to say his name. I'm going to Dibang, which is, I think he's an Indian male. He was one of the tutors. The owner, Emmy Van Derzen, made time for me, to see, is there anything she could do for me to help me? As I said, one of the admin staff who I still hold dear today, where I still have email communications because the landscape changed since the pandemic. It was that experience where I withdrew that said, I'm going back there. And it was 9 years later that we come to today that I went.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, they had moved and they had grown by that time. Yeah. And the experience that I felt, I felt a sense of belonging. If this is the only way that I can put it, and learning about this movement, these ideas, was different from, as I said, it was like those other models that I was learning with until I met Extension, which is what I wrote. I then realized it was like I was wearing a pair of heretical shoes, that the longer I walked in them, the more painful they became. And I only knew that from when I encountered an European existentialism about what it means to be human and face human dilemmas. You can imagine, as I was going through, even my personal statement, I happened upon, by accident, no training institution provided me with it, authors who spoke in a language that included me rather than excluded me. And, there's something about dehumanizing, making someone, I don't know, 3/5 of a human, if you like, right? And then trying to squeeze them into your model full. Something ain't quite right about that. There's a contradiction there.
Yeah.
And that contradiction is within, for me anyway. Like I say, it's a pair of shoes that does not fit me, whether it's psychoanalysis, psychodynamic, cognitive behavioral, all three waves as such. I suppose the mindfulness has something in there, but I'm still challenging the values that underpin that. That's what I'm looking at. How is that inclusive? Am I in a relationship or is there closure? Am I at that distance? What is the soil that is built upon?
Yeah.
And so you can imagine, for me, as I'm going along in my studies and happen upon voices, they are existential, in black, if you like, as Gordon would say, Africana. And when he uses, or when it's used, as I understand it, Africana, it's the diaspora, wherever you are globally in the world. And I'm not homogizing us as whether it's male or female, but I'm talking about that experience of being oppressed as a result of through colonialism and being enslaved. was disheartened. I was distressed meeting that. But it was a wake-up call for me. I was, as I think Nelson Maldonado Torres talks about, I awoke from my ontological slumber, or as you like, as Jordan Peele movie in Get Out talks about, from that sunken place where I had been hypnotized. I awoke from that, and I think, again, my journey began, and this is incomplete, right? You know, and anything that I'm saying, it's what I'm grappling with. It's not fixed in any, you know, concrete, you know, hierarchical essentialism, you know. I asked myself, I attended that therapy in color the other day, and, you know, just seeing the amount, it was like 285 people, and it was a mixture, a wash with different colors. Majority female, and everybody trying to move forward, and everyone with different ideas. And then a lot of us, what we speak from is we speak from a position, our position, right? And it's great. What I find difficult is when someone tries to squeeze me into that position, yeah, or place me within some kind of framework. I find that difficult. That irks me. It may be useful over there. I'm not against that. It's cool. You know, as I wrote that article and I put on there, you know, Errol Dunkley says, every man does his thing a little way different. Every man or woman do their thing a little way different. No matter what color, race, or creed he or she may be, we do our things a little way different.
Yeah.
Um,
Next question then. The research. Thank you for including me, but I know we haven't done that bit yet. So, what's it on? Why are you writing this? What do you hope to illustrate?
The question started out as, what is the phenomenology of feeling silence as Black males of African descent navigating psychotherapy training? I had my viva, and there were so many little different things. And when I've gone and spoke to, if you like, experts on phenomenology and that method, there was kind of myth about why I was asked to remove the term silence, but I kind of see it now. And what's really interesting is that there is no way that, which I didn't know then, that it's not being snuck in through the back door. It is part of. It cannot. It's huge. It's there. Do you know? So even though I was asked to remove it, and in a way I was quite, again, it was like, remember, I came into this thing called education very late. I don't have the stories of some individuals where, you know, at the age 6 and 7, you know, they go and wondering about the world, even though I had that, you know, and that my parents were academic, and, you know, they encouraged me to read and study. You know, I didn't have a book that I turned to. I had songs, yeah, and I didn't quite understand them songs, but it really beated with me. Yeah, it made my heart beat. I couldn't articulate. And so I kind of gave up. And then I said, well, what's the experience of Black British born males of African descent navigating psychotherapy training? And again, I went, no, something's gone. A big part of this gone. And so I thought about the discussions I had with a couple of people. And I said, all right, what is the experience of Black British-born males of African descent navigating psychotherapy training dominated by a white culture? And that's what it's about. One of the reasons why I've chosen this is because in some quarters, I am not supposed to be at this level. I'm not even supposed to be doing a BA in some quarters, because there's been a path set, in a way, constructed, that should have hindered me from that. And it had a really good go at that. You know, I survived. And I also wonder, like, where are we, you and I? Where are our writings that a lot of people go on and do research, and they bring their experience to bear on what they're researching? What's it like for others who have traveled the same journey as me? What has their journeys been like? Where are they, those guys? We're present, we're there, albeit in small numbers. And the problem, what happens is that if I'm included in the research, my voice is still dumbed down. It seems almost as though it's absence. And so what we have is a problem of others talking for us, regardless of who you are. You're speaking for me. And, you know, it's Bell Hooks that said that, you know, she got tired of waiting for the Black brothers to step up. She got tired. Yeah, and so she attempted, as did other Black women, to speak on our behalf. I think Alcoff wrote a paper on that as well. You know, the difficulty is, you know, about one's positionality, and how they attempt to speak for someone else. And so I want to be that voice. I want Black males, I want to amplify our voices. I want to see for you know, academia, it's like a world in its own. It's so, in a lot of ways, although the impact it has down here is phenomenal, but it's, in a way, it's so distant, I think, a lot of the times. You know, there's something quite, for me, disingenuous. And maybe I'm being that way. I don't know. I don't know. I have, since the pandemic, you know, I'm a part of different bodies. Since the pandemic, I must have worked with at least 8 or 9 Black British-born males of African descent who are in the public eye, who, as a result of what's been going on, wanted to speak up about the racism that they face in their particular industries, yeah, that they've kept quiet about for many years. You know, I've had, you know, worked with Black couples, so how can I see these individuals? How can I understand? How can I take on, you know, even that idea of how can I have empathy if it's based within a language that don't belong here, over here? How do I do that? How do I start to listen to these human beings who have experienced something that has been quite dehumanizing? How do I empathize that? I remember writing somewhere like, you know, the worst thing a therapist trained within a Eurocentric model could say or do is that they empathize with me. That's Derek McKenzie. Yeah, I'm not saying that you can't, but for me, that's one of the worst things you can say to me, unless you've done some work, and I need to know you've done some work. You know. Social justice counseling, as somebody once wrote, who's just wrote a book about it. Counseling doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're able to do social justice work. You know, I was speaking the other day about decolonizing the curriculum, right? Opening. For me, I don't think, you know, I you know, put a few things in, you know, that we need to think about. But I cannot, I don't believe, go out and start doing that work outside unless I've done that work internally. There's a disconnect. So for me, meeting, happening upon authors that spoke my language, that, you know, some of the people saying that there aren't anybody out there. There ain't no authors out there. And it's not awash with authors. It's just we've been looking in the wrong pond. And the other problem is if you introduce that into your work, you get marked down because it's not the actual ideas or ideologies that these tutors are used to. Yeah, and it challenges the status quo. It's like a double bind in a way. And I suppose I'm talking to you about my experience as I've been going through this. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Derek. You've offered some somatization in listening to Gregory Isaacs. You also offered another form of somatization as you were tapping your left shoulder. What are these things saying to you, I wonder?
This one is about an ideology that is a lie that I've internalized, yeah, that I need to get rid of. This one is that I need to be brave. You know, Lewis Gordon talks about black lowercase and black uppercase. And lowercase is where one is aware about the systems and the racism, the anti-black racism world that we live in. Uppercase black is the black that becomes actional, a black that questions, as in Fanon says, a black that recognizes, you know, that becomes political, that recognizes the lie being, you know, because he really points out really clearly, he says that some individuals misunderstand Fanon's title of Black Skin, White Mask. Some people think it's black people trying to wear a white mask. It's not. He said what it is, it's that black does not equal inferiority, and the white mask being superiority is a lie. It's built on a colonial lie. And so reading some of his work at the moment, what I'm grappling is, and this is one of the difficulties within this project, because I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted by, he talks about it, the jousting for positions. I'm exhausted by some of the material that I'm reading, yeah, and about who and what I represent and how the lie has been constructed and built and how we still live by that. I'm exhausted every time I try to write or say something, whether it's I'm posting on LinkedIn, right? Again, you know, I'm putting myself out there, yeah, for individuals to make their judgments and perceptions of me, which is fine, but they could never know me. Yeah, that's their construction, that's their perception. They cannot know me. They can't. Unless we sit down and we do this and you ask some questions, I ask some questions. You get a sense of the context, yeah, of my story. The stories that, I suppose, the stories that was, the stories that I'm trying to create now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I suppose the world that I want to live in, I want to live in, and that I want to pass on to my 2-year-old grandchildren. Yeah.
Yes.
I want them to have a chance of navigating this, you know, horrible and yet beautiful world.
Derek, we've got about 20 minutes left, and we're halfway through the list of questions that I initially posed. Doing a piece of research as extensive and as problematic as what you are looking at, for me, is about the people around you, supporting, upholding, looking after you, because it's mammoth, the task that you've undertaken. So, not that I'm looking for names, but what is the community of support around you currently engaging
Yeah.
in this project?
Yeah. So earlier I spoke about, just a moment ago actually, about the reasons for me doing this in the world that I want. It's that little girl, Allegra, or Oakley, or Albert. That's what keeps me going. It's my soon-to-be wife, where there's no noise. You know, I get married in less than 4 weeks, right? It's those friends of mine, black and white, who have, you know, one of the things I say, and it's been said, and I've probably got it from someone, I cannot know dark without light. I cannot know honesty without dishonesty. These guys have known darkness and they know the light now. And that's my hook to keep my feet on the ground, because like I said, I think something really terrible happens, that there's a disjoint. Yeah, once you start to go into that space. Yeah, there's a, I think there's a quite a seduction that happens that people buy into. I don't want to be seduced, Michael. All I want to do, and maybe I've worked so hard for a particular privilege, if you like, and that is, when I talk about privilege, it's a privilege for me to be able to think about the world differently and find the voices that help me to navigate and do that. I have a good friend who, I set up a treatment center in 2014 because I worked a lot within addictions. In 2014, I left in 2016, and yet again, which I wrote in that little paper that I wrote, was the trustees, all white, all upper middle class, right? I set up this treatment center. I was about to leave the profession. I set it up and I based it on the European existential ideas. It was quite radical, I think, approach, because it's generally motivational around the CBT, you know? And some of those individuals are doing really well today. But there was a project manager, a white guy who I've stayed really close to. Yeah. And I'm using this categories to give to provide some context, but please understand that, like, do you know what? Down here where I am, there ain't any importance in that. I tell you that now because what I'm trying to do, I want to challenge racism. I want to challenge anti-Black racism. I want to challenge coloniality of knowledge or power and how we're taught that needs to be decolonized. Again, it's up here because what's up there comes down here. Yeah, and what happens is that there's so many sheep, or you can say consumers, rather than participants of research. They just suck out. And they never question and look at it and think, well, actually, is that it? Does that work? And so it's my son, my daughter-in-law, it's my granddaughters, it's my wife, it's my friends that I've known for 40 plus years that's been through the same sort of thing to me. You know, are there any academics? I have 2 research supervisors. They're just there to read my work and provide feedback. What support is there, Michael? What would you say? I attend conferences. You know, I have 10,000 odd people on my network. I mean, I suppose the question is, when you say support to carry this heavy load, I suppose what I should ask you is, what do you mean by support?
Peers, mentors, people who know the struggle of writing a PhD and can provide you with arms or balms.
Yeah, arms or balms are like that. I have lots of arms. I think maybe it's something about me, Michael, and I'm sure it has something to do with that. You know, I sometimes think about Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and think, where do I sit? And I certainly don't really sit in the King camp. Yeah. And I'll tell you the reason why. Again, I've known dark, and I can see the light, and I don't want to be a fence dweller that dwells on the fence. I think what I'm doing now is working through, and I suppose the research gives me an opportunity to really articulate that and the experiences and lives of other Black males. But in that, couch that within a Black Africana existential discussion, yeah, where, you know, I opened up my pilot study that I've now completed and uploaded about, you know, 2022. There was a peer of mine who's already an academic but doing a doctorate, something different, and we're on online forum, and she says something around down the line, and really what's really interesting, the course was working with, you know, this with or within. That irks me because it's still positioned as though something is wrong with the people. There isn't. There isn't. But she opened with, when we're talking about that, you know, so the tutor spoke about he's walking down in the park, he's got his mobile phone, walking his dogs, mobile phone in his back pocket, and he's aware there's a young Black kid walking down behind him somewhere, but I don't know where. He takes his phone out of his back pocket, puts it in the front pocket. He writes this. This invites her to write that, oh, when I'm walking down the street, you know, white European, what part of Europe, when I'm walking down the street, if I see a Black man approaching me, you know, automatically I go into survival mode. Yeah, my pupils expand, and all of a sudden I think that this Black man that's about to approach me is a predator. This is what she's wrote. And so I've opened up with that quote because that isn't a new phenomenon. It's not new. People still hold these age-old ideas about what a Black man is. And so for me, I really want to, within that, disrupt this ideology. I want to disrupt it. You know, I want here's the thing. I think that like you are better positioned as I am, right? And it's just better position. Doesn't mean no one else can't, but I'm going to say it, better position to work with a young black male if you've done the work yourself, as with me. If we have done the work, not because you've trained to be a counselor, because you probably still perpetuate in a colonial ideology somewhere. We're better positioned. Yeah, I think that's the from W.E. Du Bois to Lewis Gordon to Anna Gordon to Paget Henry, where you become from double consciousness, you come to a potentiated double consciousness, which means there's a lot of potential because I know what's behind the veil. I've unveiled it. It's been unveiled. So at the moment, it's family, it's friends, it's 2 research supervisors, and it's the likes of speaking with people like you, reading and seeing what's put up on, but my balming comes from my family and my friends. Yeah.
Thank you. 2 questions.
Yeah.
Your LinkedIn, I think, is a really good introduction to some of the things that you're aware of, some of the things that you would like to comment on, and you do comment, and you then send it out into the world for people to do what they want to, and then feedback to you if that's what they choose to do. What causes at the moment speak to you the loudest? So you've mentioned yours, and there are an array of different causes that are in the public zeitgeist or public mind at the moment. I'm just wondering, especially the post that you sent out last week,
Yeah.
what's calling you? What's calling you to your attention at this point in time?
This is going to extend well beyond, right? It's well beyond my time and probably even my granddaughter's time or her children. I need to be actionable, political, and somehow, like everybody else is trying to do, we're bumbling about trying, in some ways, some people, to make this world a better place where oppression no longer exists. That is going to always be there. But because it's always going to be there doesn't mean that if you're in a position to do something and turn a blind eye, you know what the saying goes, right? You're probably part of that problem. And so for me, I think, as I use the word privilege, I'm in a position to do that. But I think what really, and I've said it, what I came from a place of like, you know what, I ain't given this. This we see on the media and all the rest of it. Oh, such and such, was using racist slurs or committed, some racist acts. And I used to say, don't give it oxygen, just lock them up, because giving it oxygen keeps it running. Just lock them up. The dilemma I have is if you don't say anything, you don't do anything. And so that's what I'm grappling with. But I'm of the idea, and this is what speaks to me, anything that talks and highlights the call to reparations, because I think that that is really going to unveil further the lies that we're all being victim to. So anything that unveils something around that, the calls for reparation, I don't believe it's going to happen, because what that would open up, I think it's beyond my imagination. But anything that calls for that, anything that highlights, what is being hidden from us being human beings, what's been hidden. A lot of this stuff I'm only just learning I'm 60 in 5 weeks' time. This process has been quite healing for me. Hopefully I get to the end. I live and I get to the end, and I'm able to defend and get that, that doctorate. But the process, as I said, it's been a constant battle where I've felt fatigued, racial battle fatigue, and I've stuck at it. A racial battle fatigue doesn't actually mean it's just white people I'm battling. It doesn't mean it's just males I'm battling. I'm battling an ideology that just can't go away. And all those that perpetuate that. Even I, because I also have to do that work, and I struggle. How do I do that? Gordon talks about it's even in our methods needs to be, our methods are colonial. The methods we use to go and do research, even that needs to be decolonized.
Wow. Derek, you drop in a whole heap of knowledge here. I really appreciate your time. How can people get hold of you if they wanted to?
Well, as I said, I'm on LinkedIn. I have
Oh,
a website that's just sat there. It does the job, but it's there. I'm a member of Batan, so I'm on their therapist list. Find a therapist. So my email's out in public. I'm out there. You just have to look me up.
Derek, this has been a truly engaging conversation. Thank you very much for your time. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you also. I just want to finish this. I felt embarrassed that it's been 3 years since we did our interview, and I'm looking what I've done. Again, I've had to put it on hold, getting married and all kind of things, life things that happen. But I'm looking forward to going back to our conversation and really hopefully giving your story of what it's been like training, to doing it justice. And there is going to be a time where I'm going to ask us all to come back together just to sit and read through and see what we think about it.
I look forward to that. Again, we're talking arms and bombs.
Arms and bombs. Yeah,
Interesting. Thank you.
you're
Thank you once
welcome.
again. And good luck with the marriage and everything that is to happen, defending. I'm sure you'll do well.
Thank you ever so much, Michael.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye bye.
All right. Bye.